I've been watching and rewatching the new Silent Hill 2 Remake trailer and gameplay footage, looking into information around the development of the game, and generally doing a lot of research, so I figured it might be a good idea to clarify my thoughts on things, explain some of my reactions to seeing the trailers live, and put my overall opinions out there. Before getting into everything, I want to address a few things up front. 1. Being critical of a product you might spend money and time on is not something that should be shamed. It's completely reasonable to be critical of a new game or any product before you buy it, especially at a price of $70 to $80 USD. As a streamer for over a decade and a Silent Hill fan for 25 years, my aim has always been to provide an interesting, informative, and thorough coverage of the franchise, with as many facts and trivia as possible, as well as my own opinions and interpretations. In order for me to be as thorough as possible and make videos as soon as possible, I hate early access. It's basically required for me to purchase the deluxe edition on both PS5 and PC, an investment of nearly $200. You better believe I'm going to be hypercritical with a $200 price tag on a new entry into a series I've been playing for more than half of my lifespan. Not everyone shares that viewpoint, so your criticism might not be quite as harsh as mine. And that's perfectly okay. Opinions and standards are allowed to be different. 2. Silent Hill 2 has been my personal favorite Silent Hill game, and essentially my favorite video game in general, for 23 years and counting, and I only point that out to give context to the passion behind my opinions. But it is sometimes misconstrued as elitism or gatekeeping, which is never my intention. I absolutely loathe gatekeeping in communities, and part of my goal has always been to inspire new fans to take an interest and play the games, learn more about them, share resources of information, and let people form their own ideas and opinions. I just wanted to give some context to my personal history so you can not only hopefully understand my viewpoints better, but also understand my biases as well. I played the core games of this series between the ages of 11 and 16, some of the most formative years of a typical person's lifespan. Nearly all of one's favorite things and memories, tastes in music, movies, art, and of course games, typically is formed the strongest during those 5 years, and I am no exception. So I admit I have a stronger personal bias towards the original Team Silent games. I try to be as fair as possible in my analysis, but I'm also human. 3. I am absolutely against any sort of hatred towards people. You can be critical of the things people make. You can be critical of the actions people take. But hating someone because of who they are, where they were born, what they look like, or anything else beyond their own conscious choices is not acceptable to me. If you share those hateful mindsets, then I do not wish for your viewership, support, nor your association with my community. There have been some absolutely disgusting takes when it comes to the changes of character appearances in Silent Hill 2 Remake. It's one thing to make comparisons between a fictional character's designs. That is always inevitable with remakes, but many people have taken it way too far with horribly misogynistic, bigoted, and hurtful comments aimed at putting down real people and other fans. It depresses me that the overall fandom is tainted by these views from such a small yet vocal subset of fans that unfortunately also overshadow much of the more fair and reasonable criticisms other fans have towards the remake. Stop the senseless hate. Please, be good to each other. With that out of the way, here are my thoughts on the remake so far. As far as characters go, Laura is easily my favorite of the new cast. Her appearance feels new but still captures the familiar essence of the original. The performances seen so far from Evie Templeton playing Laura have been great, but I have to address my issue with Laura, specifically what we see in the scene where she locks James in the Flesh Lips room. After Laura locks James in the room, in the original, her tone comes off as mischievous, but not mean-spirited. She taunts with,
"What's the magic word?"
implying that if James would just calm down, apologize, and say please, she may open the door for him. Laura's attitude towards James had a shift when James calls her a
"You snotty little brat,"
where she goes from being playful and mischievous to genuinely upset and begins stumbling over her words.
Why, you...
As she struggles to think of the worst possible things she could call James in response. It's a very childlike insult, but for Laura, it's probably the harshest swear she knows. Her hesitation implies racking her brain for it. It's not something she just blurts out all the time. In the remake, James isn't nearly as loud and aggressive towards Laura after being locked in the room. He still pounds the door for a moment and still calls her a brat, but this time in a quieter tone, almost under his breath. As the flesh lips begins making more noise, James becomes quiet, panicked and apologetic. "Please let me out, Laura, there's something in here." Despite saying please and sounding genuinely distressed, Laura doubles down on calling James a liar and a fart face, triples down on fart face, to be accurate. While the performances are pretty good, Laura's more so than James's, the change to the dialogue and tone of Laura's response makes her come off as much more mean-spirited than in the original. And I hope this isn't an attempt to push a tropey, mean, creepy kid angle that we've seen in some other horror titles in the past. Mary's letter to Laura in the original specifically states that Laura doesn't like James, since he's surly and doesn't laugh much, but that she should give him a chance. Laura in the original captures a child's interpretation of this letter very well, in my opinion. She loves Mary, so she respects her request to think better of James, but at the same time, she has her reasons to think poorly of him as well. The more time she spends around him, the more she warms up to him. She seems almost completely friendly with him by the time you get to the sequence in the hotel, just after James watches the VHS tape.
Okay?
At least, until James tells her the truth.
You killer! Why'd you do it? I hate you!
Generally, I prefer that original depiction of Laura compared to the seemingly meaner Laura of the remake, but perhaps the overall context of the full game will make it feel more appropriate. Moving on to the next character I somewhat liked but also have some concerns with, Maria. For her design, I'm somewhat torn. Takayoshi Sato's original concept artwork for Maria actually looks fairly similar to Bloober Team's design, right down to being a dress with a jacket on top. However, I feel it's also important to remember that concept art is an initial concept that evolved and changed for a reason. First of all, Maria is a manifestation of the town. That much is a confirmed fact.
More than the other places we've been.
She is meant to be a creation of the town, made from James's desires for his wife Mary, but in a healthier, sexier form. The sub-scenario title for the original game, Born from a Wish, is a reference to this aspect. Maria is literally born from James's wishes. Her design was evolved from her original concept art by Takayoshi Sato into her original game model created by Shingo Yuri, to specifically be overtly sexualized in nature. So for the design in the remake to be considered faithful, regardless of it being changed in any way, it should also reflect this aspect of her character. And I feel the current design doesn't convey this nearly as well as the old one. As for her voice performances, there isn't much to go on yet, but from the bits we have heard, Salome Gunnarsdottir sounds fine. Little touches like her having a bit more dialogue with James while exploring could add some interesting insight to her character and the relationship between the two outside of specific cutscenes compared to the original. However, this kind of dialogue can easily be overdone, and having too much dialogue from a side character during otherwise tense and atmospheric gameplay can easily make them go from interesting to annoying. A good example would be something like Silent Hill 4, when Eileen would occasionally comment on the story or environment at random moments, and the comments she made were affected by her level of possession.
I can't read any more than that.
Next up, Mr. Protagonist himself, James Sunderland. This is where I need to address something that is more concerning than the models themselves, and that is the overall lack of consistency. Ever since the first trailer premiered, I've been commenting that James seemed to have a different model in practically each scene of the trailer. The face, the voice, the hair, the clothes, constantly changing to the point where I'm not sure if they are just using footage from drastically different builds of the game for these trailers, or if there is some intentional game mechanic where the character's appearances morph and change as the game goes on. I can't even give a fair, honest opinion on liking or disliking his appearance because my opinion changes from scene to scene, frame to frame. Some look great. Some look horrible. If it's a lighting issue, the way many fans speculate, that speaks volumes about a core visual effect that is absolutely crucial for the atmosphere of Silent Hill that isn't being handled well. Proper lighting to emphasize the scenes, environments, enemies, and character features is extremely important for maintaining a sense of immersion and tension as you explore in the dark with limited light sources. As for James's voice performances, just as the face has been inconsistent, the voice seems very forced and unnatural. Likely because Luke Roberts, Remake James's actor, is British Canadian with a noticeable accent. Some actors are better than others at masking their natural accent and doing a convincing American accent. Take, for example, the absolute gold standard, Hugh Laurie.
Really?
But for Luke Roberts, his lines give me the feeling that he is forcing a bit too much to keep his American accent up, and it causes some strange, inconsistent sounding lines. When his tones get lower, deeper, and more gruff, he gets an almost southern US accent in his voice. It reminds me a bit of Andrew Lincoln's not-so-convincing Georgia accent as Rick Grimes in The Walking Dead.
Me? You mean me?
When his tones are more neutral or higher, such as when he's talking to Laura or Angela in the cemetery, it sounds better, more natural and convincing.
It's okay, I didn't mean to scare you.
Speaking of Angela, it's time to address the most controversial character redesign at the moment. Similarly to my comments earlier about Maria and how the remake design seems more similar to the original concept art drawn by Takayoshi Sato, Angela seems to be modeled a bit more closely to Sato's concept art as well, with a slightly rounder, younger-looking face.
I don't really care if it's dangerous or not.
However, just as I explained with Maria, the designs evolved and changed from the conceptual stage for a reason. We need to clear up a bit of conflicting information. Many people cite the Silent Hill 2 making of documentary, where the narrator describes Angela as being 16 or 17.
16 or 17.
However, it's worth pointing out there have been several statements made during that documentary that have been corrected after the fact by members of Team Silent. So not all the information in that documentary can be taken as fact. If you go by the game manual included with the original US release of Silent Hill 2, Angela is described as being a recent high school graduate, which in the US would be generally around age 18. Sato specifically designed Angela to physically reflect her history as an abuse victim. Her appearance and mannerisms are meant to convey awkward discomfort, especially in the presence of men, with a tendency to hide her features. Shingo Yuri, who designed her in-game model, reshaped Angela's rounder face from Sato's concept art to more closely align with that of her actress, Donna Burke, who has a slightly longer, more narrow face with sharper features. Despite being in her late teens, many people originally perceive Angela as being older, which was the developer's intent, to hint at the effect her life of abuse has had on her, and I just don't feel like the newer design conveys that aspect of her character as well. I should point out that according to Jeremy Blaustein, who was not only the localization lead and translator for the original games, but also the casting director, Donna Burke was not cast because of her age, 37 at the time of recording, to convey the forced maturity of Angela from her abuse, but rather there were very few people auditioning for the role, and Donna Burke was easily the most qualified and tenured actress who wanted the part, so her age had no impact on the casting decision. As for my opinions on the new Angela, with all of that said, she's not great.
Excuse me.
Gianna Keel's deeper, raspier vocal tones, with an almost Valley Girl inflection on some dialogue, seems like a very strange direction choice to me.
I'm looking for Silent Hill.
Visually, while I prefer the original, I think I can get used to the new look, but the inconsistent lighting making her look drastically different from scene to scene does not help. Some scenes, she looks alright. Some scenes, she looks very strange and uncanny.
I guess I don't really care.
Same issue as James and Maria. Alright, that's it for the characters now, at least until we get some footage or screenshots of Eddie. Moving on to the enemies, we get to see nurses, mannequins, mandarins, creepers, flesh lips, abstract daddy, and everything looks alright for the most part. The models and textures themselves are honestly pretty nice looking, and no doubt having Masahiro Ito consulting with Bloober Team helped out with that, but where they start to lose me are some of the animations. Animations look very unnatural at times. Movement seems to not have the correct weight behind it, especially during faster paced combat and moments of action. But hopefully this is something that can be polished up before release, or possibly even patched after. Pyramid Head wasn't shown off at all during the new trailers and gameplay, but going off the bit we saw from the last transmission, he seems fine as well. Some small details and changes, but nothing that jumped out at me as offensive or concerning in any way. The environments in the town, which are practically characters unto themselves, look great. Environmental detail and visual effects have always been one of the strong points of Bloober Team, and I say that as someone who has disliked every single one of their games that I have played. The visuals department has never been my area of concern when it comes to Bloober's games, but rather their weaknesses in terms of writing story, characters, pacing, and gameplay. And it's hard to get a proper sense of those things from just trailers and the small amount of footage we've seen so far. Seeing the familiar yet slightly different areas of the town has me excited to explore all over again. I can't wait to look around for details and enter buildings and areas not previously open for exploration. Several textures and bits of the environment seem to be taken directly from the original game. Bits of graffiti on the buildings, the animal drawings on the wall where James and Laura meet, the Bible quote graffiti in the starting bathroom area, the Jack poster in the Brookhaven locker room. Clearly some care was put into this aspect, and I look forward to looking around the town with my usual eye for detail. On the topic of exploration, one small gripe: James talks to himself a little too much for my liking. This has become a common trend in games for quite some time now, and you can even see the same thing in Homecoming and Downpour.
Let's look around.
Pick up an item? Oh, I needed this. Read a note? I can't believe it. Found a puzzle item? I wonder what this is for. It's a lazy and unnatural way to try to guide and inform the player about what should be fairly obvious things, and I really wish games would stop doing this so much. Combat. I have to say, combat has never been a standout point for me in the Silent Hill games. It's something that is just a means to an end, a necessary obstacle for the video game format. With the remake, a few issues do stand out to me more than others though. Bloody red screen borders, green puke overlays, and crap all over the screen blocking my view is extremely annoying and takes me right out of the moment. I get that this can be a useful tool for immersion when trying not to have things like health bars and status indicators on the screen, especially for games in first person where you can't see your own character model. However, Silent Hill 2 Remake is a third-person game. Who exactly is being puked on where it is obscuring the player's vision? A cameraman following James? It's entirely unnecessary. You can see your character. You can see the enemy. You can see the attack. You know James is covered in acid puke. You don't need an overlay obscuring 25% of the gameplay to emphasize that fact. Likewise, you don't need a throbbing red border on the edge of the screen to show that James is hurt. His animations change, he grunts, he limps, he shows visible wear and tear with blood and grime on his jacket. There are plenty of more natural visual indicators in place for players to know James is hurt, it's time to heal, without such a distracting interface element. Hopefully this is something that can be easily toggled off with a menu setting. Speaking of user interface, button prompts, which were seen in the original trailer, seem to be missing from the newest gameplay, so this is likely removed or is a setting that can be turned off. I am always for the option of more toggles for a more personalized experience. There are still small white circle icons to identify which doors, notes, items, and elements can be interacted with. This obviously is a personal preference, but I dislike these kinds of prompts in most games, and prefer a more natural exploration and examination of the environment. Animations, as I mentioned previously, look strange. Transitions from walking to running, swinging a weapon and swapping to a gun, interacting or breaking elements in environments. Many things seem to be very jarring, and it's especially noticeable in the combat. Again, combat wasn't that important to me in the original, and as long as it still serves its function in the remake without unnecessary frustration, then it will be fine by me. But right now, it just visually looks somewhat rough. It's not a huge deal to me at the end of the day. The animations during the story beats and cutscenes are far more important to me personally than the combat animations. So if those look and feel good, that's a pass in my book. And so far, it's a mixed bag. Some things look pretty good, and others are reminding me of Silent Hill Ascension's character models, awkwardly idle posing. This could just be a result of using outdated build footage for the trailer, and things could absolutely be more polished by release, so we will just have to wait and see. Lastly, the music and sound. Akira Yamaoka is honestly killing it so far. Until we get the full context from the final game, it's very hard to make a fair judgment since sounds and balance can be heavily edited for trailers. But so far, the music is on point, the sounds of the weapons seem better than previous trailers, the creatures make familiar sounds, some even using the original sound effects with slight modifications to them, along with some disturbing new sound effects such as these distorted baby sounds you can hear during this nurse combat footage. By the way, Ito has pointed out years ago on Twitter, the nurses have a baby or fetus design in their face, just to add some credibility and reasoning behind this audio edition. Personally, I like it. Anyway, I think this remake still shows more promise than what I initially assumed, but also has some relatively glaring issues to be addressed that could immensely help if handled well, and immensely hurt if ignored. Either way, we will find out together on October 6th of this year. Expect a ton of coverage, in-depth videos, speedruns, and more once this game drops. And let me know in the comments if you like this video, what your thoughts are, if you want to see more discussion videos like this in the future. Until next time, this has been Nub Zombie, your favorite undead horror nerd. Be good to each other. Much love. And peace.